Hello, Garland Nixon here. And after 4 years of pure neocon policies, we have an interesting a convergence of time and consequences. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and let's talk about where we are right now, the convergence of time and consequences. I listened to a very interesting, I really like Shahid Bolson right over there at Middle Nation. He always has some really interesting and unique stuff going on. And, he's got that Malcolm X kind of way of talking that's very interesting. But one of the things I was listening to him the other day, and he was talking about the terms, basically crisis and consequences. And I'm really big on words, right? What they mean, and the importance of meaning of words and how we use words and language, right? And so we have a numerous consequences coming up right now, converging on a U.S. election, and one could, make an argument that these are crises, that these are debacles, all, whatever the case, but there are policies going on, and these are consequences of the policies. These are what we're looking at is the natural outcome of particular policies, right? So we've got an election coming up. Kamala Harris and is the Democratic nominee. And I've been watching her recently, and quite frankly, she's intellectually unimpressive, to be charitable. Not to be charitable, well, let's not use the kind of words that come to mind. But, I listen to her, and she's really, really poor candidate, unable to answer questions. Apparently, there's a comprehension issue there, right? Because if someone says to me, Garland, what time is it? And I start talking about, I don't know, how the Romans used sundials, and my opponent hates something or other, and it goes on. And at no time during my answer does it ever dawn on me that I should at least fake that I'm answering the question, that I should pretend to answer the question. I just babble and wander aimlessly and then stop at some point. Then I got real intellectual problems, to be quite frank. And that's Kamala Harris. You ask her a very specific question, she just babbles and wanders aimlessly. And then at some point she stops. That's it. There's no place she's going. There's no real plan for her, an intellectual or verbal plan. There's no talent in evading the question. It can be a talent. Evading a question can be a talent. Some people are really good at it, and the best politicians are really good at it. Kamala, you ask her a question, and she just babbles for a while, and then she stops. And it's usually something about, to be an American, what it means to be an American is to have dreams, to have hopes. That's where she goes repeatedly, and you just sit there and you're like, this is what they got now. This is what they have. They basically, let's start here for the neocons. We got to start with politics, I think, before I go any further. And that is, Bernie Sanders is what Bernie Sanders is. Let's not discuss Bernie Sanders. But the bottom line is the ruling elite and the neocons saw him as a problem. They saw him as a problem for whatever reason. And so they decided, well, we've got to make sure that he doesn't win. And so they basically cheated. They cheated in 2016. They rigged the primaries. Trump won. So now they got the consequences of that. And the people, again, wanted something different. Whatever Bernie is irrelevant. The people wanted something different. They saw him as something different. The ruling elite said no. So they were exposed, really, because all along there was the illusion of democracy, the illusion that that the voters got a chance to choose, until such time as the voters made a choice that they didn't like, and they said, "Okay, the time for the illusion is up." So they cheated, and they stuck old Joe Biden in, who is a guy who, in his best years, he wasn't very bright. He is a pure neocon warmonger. And on top of that, he was, kind of melting away intellectually. Bottom line, the Democratic Party cannot, in any way, shape, or form, ever, ever, ever practice democracy again. They just can't do it because the ruling elite is so far from the working class. They have veered so far away from the working class that the working class would never select, if given an opportunity, the candidate that the ruling elite would want. In the Democratic Party would never do it, nor the Republican Party, period. But the Republican Party does not have the machinations or maybe the motivations to cheat as much as the Democrats. I don't agree with any of their policies, but to be quite frank, the Republican Party's processes, there's no question in my mind, it's cleaner. The ruling elite didn't want Trump, and the voters got Trump, so they let them choose Trump. It ain't happening in the Democratic Party. It can't happen in the Democratic Party, and it won't happen in the Democratic Party. So there they are. They get around to this time, as I have argued before. So just taking a few minutes, to talk about how we got here. Give me 3 or 4 more minutes. So ultimately, what happens? We get to 2024, and of course, the Democratic Party could choose somebody who doesn't want war, or could choose somebody who does not align with the ruling elite. So the Democratic Party, in my opinion, had a very, very diabolical plan, wherein they just rigged the primaries so that Biden could win, knowing they were going to have to replace him. Totally rigged the primaries. They wouldn't even put other names on the ballot in a number of states. Boom. Biden wins. And here's what's obvious. They had debates in June. This has never happened. Never debate. They had debates before we even had the candidates. Think about this. You didn't have candidates selected yet, but they had debates as if they had candidates selected. Why? Because they knew that Biden was going to crash and burn in the debates, and then they would be able to replace him with Kamala, exactly as they planned, I think. Oh, come on now. If we all knew he was going to crash and burn, you're not going to tell me they didn't know. They knew, I knew, you knew, we all knew, they knew. And as soon as that happened, it was almost like they had the articles teed up. Like before the debate was over, there were articles. Oh, we got to replace Biden. He's got to go. Kamala's got to blah, 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 right? She's the perfect person that they want. A hollow conduit, a log, basically. Except the log is probably of much greater value than Kamala Harris, right? So a log is positive for the world, where the Kamala Harris is very dangerous for the world. Okay, in they go with Kamala Harris, and now they can do what it is. I got to go back. In fact, let me say this. I got to go back and revisit on my channel. I've got a video that I did back in 2016 about the realignment of the Democratic Party, and I want to go back and look at that. I think it'll be, I want to see what I said. I think it may be interesting because I think it may have been a pretty good prediction. But at any rate, so now they got Kamala Harris, and now they just come right out of the closet. Here I am. Look at me. I'm out of the closet. That's what the Democrats do. How do they do that? Hey, Ronald Reagan now supports us. Dick Cheney now supports us. George W. Bush comes out and says, well, I'm not going to say who I'm voting for. Well, we know if it was the Republican candidate, he'd say. So they got all of the neocons everywhere, historical neocons, you name it. They're all like, hey, we're with Kamala. So now they are where they are. And here we sit going into an election, and the discussion going into election after 4 years of neocon, pure neocon rule. I mean, Tony Blinken, Sullivan, these people are, Kurt Campbell, pure violent warmongering neocons. And what is the question that what we're wrestling with now? Nuclear war. After 4 years of these people, we're talking about nuclear war. We're saying let's face it. What is the one thing that the president of the United States is supposed to do? Keep us out of a nuclear war. That's his way. Everything else, we can have an economic collapse. We won't be happy about it. We can have everything else, but it's kind of hard Let me put it to you like this: for those of you who saw The Matrix and you saw the one guy who was about to kill Neo, right? They all thought Neo was the one, right? It's kind of savior figure, right? Mythological kind of savior figure. And at one point, the guy who turned on Neo and backstabbed him says, "He ain't the one." You know why? How can he be the one if he's dead? Because he planned on killing him, but it didn't work, right? But that was his thing. How can he be the one if he's dead? Well, that question was interestingly asked later, that both things could be true in the movies. But all I'm saying is this: we're the leading empire. We're the shining city on the hill. Remember that? All this crap. The guy, what's his name, who was on the Mayflower or whatever, said that crap. Some preacher, on and on and on. Reagan used it, on and on. We're the shining city on the hill. And the question arises: how can we be the shining city on the hill if we're dead? There ain't no hill. So after 4 years, the consequences of neocon rule is that we are facing an existential threat. The consequences of the U.S. policy to overthrow a government on the border of a nuclear superpower and then to attempt to use that country to attack militarily the nuclear superpower with the veneer of a proxy war, when in fact it is very, very clear that this is a direct war. There is no NATO. NATO is just an umbrella organization that the U.S. empire uses to attack Russia and to bring all of its colonies and vassals and subordinates together in the East so it can command, in the EU, so that it can command their foreign policy. We have a situation wherein the truth is out. The reality is out. The Russians are saying, look, let's stop playing with these words. Let's stop trifling with this crap. Here's the reality. We know, we all know that you have started a hot war against us and you're attacking us. And if it gets any more direct, any more clean, if you just like take the veil off and say, okay, we're firing missiles at Russia, then we ain't going to pretend anymore. That's what Russia's saying. We ain't going to pretend anymore. And we're going to hit you and hit you hard. And we are considering ending this thing once and for all. We tried to tell you, leave us alone. You want to try to take everything, well, then you'll die. So Russia's saying, now Russia is not saying we will use nuclear war, a nuclear attack on you, but they're saying we reserve the right. And Russia will retaliate in some way, shape, or form. And at that point, the odds are survival. You're over the hill. You know what I mean? You've passed. It's as soon as Russia says, look, it ain't a proxy war anymore. If you fire these missiles at us, we're going to hit you back. At that point, there's no more proxy war. There's direct war between U.S. and NATO, and within weeks, if not days, if not hours, it deteriorates into nuclear conflict, and we all die. I think everybody understands that. Come on, let's not pretend that if this thing leaves the realm of proxy and gets into direct conflict, that there's any hope for human survival. No, there's not. Silly. But you can fool yourself into believing that if you choose, but the fact of the matter is it ain't true. 4 years of neocon rule, and that's where 4 measly years of neocon rule, and they take us to the edge of nuclear annihilation of all humans. That's it. So now, that being the case, there's now an election coming up in a month. Okay. And they have to convince people 4 more years is a good idea. And what has their reign of terror wrought? Let's start with the EU. You think we got it bad here. If you look at right now, I had somebody tell me, well, Germany is not as bad as somebody contacted me. Germany's not bad as you're making out to look. Well, the US is. So I guess the message must be Germany's doing better than the US. I don't think it is. I'm not saying that Germany is a dystopian wasteland by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is this. I'm in the US, and the cost of living is, I mean, people, first of all, Stellantis, which is the company that owns Dodge and Chrysler, et cetera, is going to collapse. It's going to collapse. Jeeps, a Jeep and all that, you go to a dealer, and I mean, the average cost of a Jeep in the last 3 years went from 34,000 to 55,000. Who the hell is going to buy $55,000 for a damn Jeep? Dodge trucks, 80, 90,000. Really? Jeep Grand Wagoneer, 110, 120,000. Get out of here. And you know what happened? The CEO of Stellantis like doubled his salary to 40 million, 39.5 million a year. That is neoliberalism. So companies like that are doomed, and people can't afford to buy cars. People can't afford to buy houses. So I don't think it's that much better in Europe and Germany. I think Europe and Germany is economically melting away, and they have no future. They have no present. It's being deliberately deindustrialized. You've got, this is what's hilarious, people saying they're afraid of the far right, the far in Europe. The far right's going to take over. These fascist far right, really? So you have the so-called center, the SPD and the Greens and these people who are literally aligned with goose-stepping, Hitler-tattooed Sieg Heil Nazis. Right? You got people right now who are saying we have to support the Nazis. What about the Nazis? Nazis, they ain't all of that bad. We got to give them, the Nazis, more money, more uniforms, more guns. We must help self-avowed, proud Nazis attack Russia. Really? What about politics at home? We got to protect ourselves from the far right. You got to protect yourselves from the far right while you literally support Nazis and war and arming Nazis to take tanks into Russia, and they like painted swastikas on, literally painted swastikas on their tank. They have the iconography of the Third Reich all over everything they do. Patches, wolf's heads, skulls, you name it, all the iconography of the Third Reich. You are supporting them financially, philosophically, politically, economically, militarily, supporting these people, yet we're to believe that you want to protect us from the far right. So that's where Europe is now. They have a political contradiction that cannot be resolved through philosophical and intellectual or political discussion. It can't be resolved that way, because you can tell the people one thing, but as they begin to wake up, they start to say, well, wait a minute, you're telling me you're here for my good, to make my life better, but my life is getting materially deteriorating, and you're supporting these people and telling me, yay, we've got to get together to support Ukraine, but the people you're supporting in Ukraine are goose stepping all over creation. Perhaps there's some contradictions. Might I add, Nord Stream. Slowly but surely, people in the EU are starting to ask some uncomfortable questions about Nord Stream. The neocons simply attacked Germany. They're knuckle-dragging apes. They said, hey, Germany, will you get rid of Nord Stream? And Germany's like, nah, because it benefits us, economically. And the neocons are like, oh, okay, fair enough. And then they blew it up, and they didn't even try to hide it. And the German government's like, oh, we didn't see anything. La, 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 la. I don't see anything. I don't see anything. The Russians, or maybe 6 Ukrainians in a sailboat. Yeah. Whatever the U.S. tells us, that's what happened. Again, what are you doing? Again, German government, why are you working with the U.S.? We're working with the U.S. to preserve democracy around the world. What about your people at home? We don't give a shit what they think. What about the voters? Voters, who cares? Really? You think we care about the voters? We're too busy preserving democracy around the world. Again, you have generated some contradictions in political, economic, philosophical, intellectual contradictions that cannot be resolved. That it certainly can't be resolved by the ruling elite. It can only be resolved by the people. So the European contradictions are rising. And what's causing the European people to have to address these is not that they want to. A lot of Europeans are racist bastards that hate Russians. I'm not saying they're just racist bastards. I'm saying they hate Russians. There are a lot of Europeans, let's be honest, that hate Russians with a kind of a racial superiority hate for the Russians. I remember watching this video, and this woman in Germany, and she was on TV saying, yes, the Russians look European, but they're not really. In other words, now that is clearly saying that the Russians aren't European. Say, in other words, the Europeans are superior. Joseph Borrell, well, Europe is a garden and the rest of the world is a jungle, right? The ruling elite, I'm not talking about the European people, the working class. The ruling elite clearly are racist bastards, and they feel like Russia's below them. And to be quite frank, if the European people would wake up, they don't like you that much either. So they will work through propaganda to convince the working class that Russians are inferior. And so the working class, and this is an old trick, as the lives of the working class materially continues to deteriorate, the ruling elite has to convince them that they are superior to somebody, because their lives are going to hell. And they're like, well, at least you're not Russian, African, Islamic, whatever. Why? Because you're superior to them. Oh, great. Wonderful. I'm superior to them. Now, your life is hell. You're being deindustrialized. Your standard of living is going straight to hell. But at least you're superior to the Russians or whoever the hell they choose, right? It is an old imperialist trick that says, as the people of our country have to suffer for the ruling elite to advance their own economic plans, I will just gaslight the working class into believing that they get some kind of a philosophical win, some kind of a cultural win, because they'll still be superior. Sure, will you starve to death? Fair enough. Will you be living your life be a living hell? Yeah, certainly, obviously. But at least you're better than fill in the blank, in this instance, the Russians, right? And there's a certain element in Europe that's happy to buy into that. I think the element that's realized they're getting had is growing, but Europe is an economic collapse. Europe, the ruling elite, here's the immigration issue. I'll mention that in Europe and to some extent the US, because it's part of the collapse of Europe. The chickens are coming home to roost. That's all the immigration is. The chicken's coming home to roost. You go to Syria, you blow the hell out of Syria, you blow the hell out of Algeria. I wonder why there are all these Algerians running around in France. Can't figure that out, right? So the so the EU has destabilized countries, blown the hell out of them, done all these terrible things. And guess what? The people end up showing up in Europe. They're poor, they're struggling, their natural resources all been stolen and brought to Europe. They end up in Europe. Now, do the Europeans say to the ruling elite, say to the European masses, as the European masses say, hey, all these people are showing up here and their jobs are, our ability to make a living is deteriorating. Let's not forget something. Before we go any further. It started with the EU. Remember, the EU said, hey, look, the Europe is now open. You can travel anywhere with Europe without a visa. And what did you have? You had the Western Europeans that were more wealthy. Let's face it. Well, I wonder why France was so wealthy. Oh, that's right, because it was still stealing gold and uranium and everything from Africa. So let's be honest about this. Let us be honest. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's talk truth here. Western European had been a colonialist society. They'd gone around the world and they stole people's stuff. And so they were richer because of theft. That's the main reason. It wasn't innovation. It wasn't that they were smarter. It wasn't that somehow their, what do you want to call it? Their culture was superior to those of the Africans and the Middle Easterners and the Asians. No, it wasn't. It was barbarism. They went to those countries, they massacred people, they genocided people, they stole their stuff, and they lived off the riches of others. Now, fortunately for the Africans and the Latin Americans and the Asians, the Eastern European countries were not on the coast, so they mostly didn't do that, culturally didn't do that. So they were poor. They were living off what they had. They weren't living off theft. Okay. So they were poor, but much more economically disadvantaged than Western European. While the EU opens things up. Why they open things up? So the poor Eastern European people could come west, dilute the labor market and drive down the cost of labor. I mean, that's what it started. It started with Europe. And what, you think they're mad? You think the ruling elite are going to be upset that they're doing the same thing with Ukraine? As winter comes, it's already started. All these Ukrainians have already started saying, we got to get the hell out of Ukraine. We're not going to have electricity. The people in Western Europe are going to be like, hey, oh crap, this sucks. We got millions of more people coming in. We got to pay for them. We got to put a roof over their head. They're bringing crime and all kinds of crap. They're bringing to us. They're not going to have jobs. They don't speak the language. Different culture. What the hell's going on here? And the ruling elite are like, I tell you what's going on here. They're going to drive the cost of labor down, and we're the ones that pay for labor. So screw you. But you end up with a France that ain't French anymore. You end up with a France that there's the African people are there, the Middle Easterners are there, the Ukrainians are there. Everybody's there but the French. And it dilutes the working class and a culture that the French people were proud of. And, granted, I have issues with the imperialism part, but they got a right to their friggin' baguettes, okay? If they want French baguettes and they want that to be the staple and they don't want it to be some Ukrainian dish or some African dish, some Middle Eastern dish, they want friggin' baguettes. Okay, fine. You're French. You like baguettes. Do your baguette thing, right? But you can't do it anymore because the ruling elite have now diluted your country with people from all over the world, including Eastern Europe and Ukraine. And in France, ain't much of French anymore. And the French that are unhappy with that doesn't make them racist. That doesn't make them evil. That doesn't make them bad. That just makes some people that are like, what the hell's going on here? I'm in France and I can't find a Frenchman, for God's sake, right? Not unreasonable question to ask if you're French. But you're taught to blame the African, the Middle Easterner, or the Ukrainian. Not so much the Ukrainian, you're supposed to welcome them, right? But you get the point. Europe has been screwed by the Biden administration to know not what. And really, they've been screwed for generations, if not centuries. These chickens were bound to come home to roost, but this has been rapidly increased, let's just say that, by the Biden administration, who also attacked Europe, impoverished Europe, boom. So what the neocons are dealing with in Europe is a collapsing economic continent, culturally a collapsing continent. But there is good news, Europe. There is good news. The United States is pumping billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weapons into your region, into Europe. All kinds of military weapons by the hundreds of billions. And you know what? As this continent starts to come unglued, the very worst factions there already have their hands on those weapons. They will be committing terrorist acts with machine guns and anti-tank missiles. They'll be shooting down planes with man pads. It ain't going to be a pretty place in Europe. 8 years of the neocons. But good, just think about it. At least the AFD didn't win. At least you didn't get the fascist far right winning. Instead, you got to deal with the Greens and the SPD, the people who are aligned with neo-Nazis. Isn't that an interesting contradiction? I don't know how you work that out in your mind. Best of luck on that one. Can't help you. I think we're suffering with the same thing here. Let's go to Ukraine. The word collapsing seems to be very pertinent to this discussion. Collapsing, right? What's going on in Ukraine? It's like putting Garland Nixon in the ring with Mike Tyson. Putting gloves on me. Okay, Garland, there you go. Ain't going to work out well. At the very beginning, you can easily predict how that's going to turn. What do you think is going to happen? Garland's in the ring with Mike Tyson. Garland's going to get knocked out really, really fast. He has no chance of winning that, right? Now, if Mike Tyson wants to, he can push me off a little bit. He can pretend like he's going to let me hit him. He can toy with me if he has reasons to drag this thing out. Let's say Mike Tyson is getting paid by the round, million a round. He's going to go 12 rounds. And then at the very last round, he's going to hit me and I will cease to exist, right? As a carbon-based being. That's what's going to happen. But he dragged it out because he had a reason to. Okay, he had other things going on. Well, they threw Ukraine up against Russia, and Russia is a country that, let's face it, if they wanted to, They could have just bombed the crap out of Ukraine and flattened city after city and really devastated that country if they wanted to. If they wanted to launch a brutal, say, Israeli type assault, the way the Israelis assault Lebanon and Beirut and all that. If they were of a mind, the way the U.S. Attacked various countries in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan, right? They could have went in and flattened cities, but for whatever reason, they elected not to. That's a whole nother story. And now what do we have? We have a Ukraine that has no economy. We have a Ukraine that has been devastated by war, an attrition war, which means literally generations of Ukrainians gone. What the Russians, what an attrition war. A lot of people don't understand an attrition war, and they always talk about towns in an attrition war. This town's falling, that town's falling, right? And if the Russians won a town, oftentimes they could take it at maybe much greater loss, right? If they wanted to take this town X, they could take it and they could lose some more people, but they take the town. But if it's an attrition war, A, I don't lose people. B, you lose people. C, I win. A plus B equals C. If I don't lose a lot and you do lose a lot, I'm going to win because it's a war of attrition. Get rid of your people, get rid of your equipment. So what do? I want you to sit in that town. And I want to bomb the crap out of it. And I want to just get rid of as much of your equipment and people as possible. And then ultimately, I'll take the town when it's about ready to fall. But I don't want a lot of soldiers and equipment left when I take it. I want you to sit there to dig in, and I'm going to pound you with missiles and bombs and stuff, kill a lot of people because it's an attrition war. I don't need the town. I need to get rid of your army. And when it's done, the Russians want to put a hurt on Ukraine so bad that there's nothing left I've said this for a while, that there's nothing left, that the U.S. says, or NATO, the U.S./NATO says, we want to come in and we want to save the Ukrainian army. I think the Russians' plan is there ain't going to be nothing left to save. We'll keep pounding it. We don't have to move. We got to make sure there's nothing left to save. Then it collapses. And if you want to come in, you got to come in on your own and fight. But the Ukrainians, what few Ukrainians that are left to fight, won't have much of a taste for it. And so that thing is going to pieces. And now, let's face it, they're just trying to hold it up until the election. And Trump is like, hey, let's screw this Ukraine thing. Let's move on. The Trump people are. And a lot of Americans are like, other than the Dick Cheney Democrats, a lot of Americans outside of the Dick Cheney Democrats are just, look, A, we're tired of this, and B, we ain't real thrilled to die in a nuclear war over Ukraine. We're going to die over it. It's like, what's happening? Okay, I've got an announcement to make. America, I'm the president. What? Bad news. You're all going to die in a nuclear conflict. Every one of you, humanity's over. The world is done. I mean, no way around that, but you're all going to die. Everybody you ever knew and every would know is going to die. That's it. We've decided to turn this planet into an empty, dry, kind of Mars-like spot with, pocked landscapes, a landscape, a moonscape, not a landscape, right? That's the bad news. The good news is, but at least Putin won't get the Donbass. And I think Americans are like, we all die, option A. B, the Russians are allowed to keep Eastern Ukraine, and the Eastern Ukrainians actually want to be part of Russia. So what we have to do is we have to actually fight the Eastern Ukrainians because they're fighting to stay in Russia. So we have to fight against the people who live in Eastern Ukraine so that they'll go back to Ukraine. At which time they'll be able to vote, won't they? Oh, by the way, and Crimea, who wants to stay in Russia. So if I understand this logically, millions and millions of Crimeans and the people in the Donbass region, which are now the new Russian regions, which used to be Eastern Ukraine, millions and millions, let's say 10 million people there, they would be put back into Ukraine. And as you've told me, Ukraine is a democracy. They would now be able to vote, and they would all vote as a bloc for pro-Russian candidates, which means Ukraine would now have a pro-Russian government. So if you get what you want, neocons, if you get what you want, then Ukraine gets a pro-Russian government. Why don't I believe that that's your plan? Oh, by the way, the current regime in Kiev has literally outlawed the language that they speak in the Donbass region in Crimea, which is Russian, and the religion, which is Orthodox Christianity, Russian Orthodox Christianity, that they worship. So their religion and their language is completely illegal in this country. And I'm supposed to believe that they want to go back into that country, that they want to be part of that country, that, yay, you saved us. You put us in a country where we're not allowed to speak the language, where we're not allowed to worship as we please. And ultimately, if we're allowed to vote, we're going to change the government to a pro-Russian government. I'm supposed to believe that trope doesn't seem to work real well. So there's contradiction after contradiction. That makes no sense. If you take the logical route for what the Dick Cheney Democrats are saying they want for Ukraine, it doesn't add up. Ukraine's a democracy. We're going to return all of these Russian-speaking Russian Orthodox Christians to Ukraine. They will then be able to vote because it's a democracy. They will then replace the current regime, which is pro-American, owned by American, puppet with American, with a pro-Russian regime, because they're going to vote as a bloc and they're going to get what they want. And I'm supposed to believe that that's what the Dick Cheney Democrats ultimately are fighting for? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So they have contradictions within their Ukrainian plan, and that's collapsing. And here we are, just before the election, and they got to try to hold on to this lie. They got to try to hold on to this contradiction for another month. That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to stop the contradiction from blowing up in their faces, both literally and figuratively, and ours too, for another month. And they can't come out and say, oh man, we're kind of screwed. We've lost this war. But they've lost the war. Time's running out, my friends. Let's move on next to Israel. What do we have here? Well, the truth of Israel is, people talk about all of this, Jewishness and Judaism and Zionism. Let's face it, Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism. Zionism is a political tool. Zionism is an effective political tool in the same way that the fascist, neo-Nazi ideology of Ukraine is a political tool. It's something that you use to weaponize people. It's something that you use to brainwash people into thinking they're superior, and that if they act in a way that's not in their best interest on behalf of the U.S. empire, that they'll be doing the right thing, right? So the U.S. needs a military outpost. I'm a firm believer in this. This is my position. They need a military outpost in the Middle East, and that's all that Israel is. And now the truth is coming out. Why? Look at the EU. We're to believe that the U.S. is acting on behalf of the EU to protect and preserve the EU, but the EU is collapsing, falling apart, being impoverished. Everything's going bad in the EU. Meanwhile, we're to believe that the U.S. is acting to preserve democracy and to stand up for Ukraine and to protect Ukraine. How's that working out for Ukraine? Ukraine's going straight to hell. Now, the U.S. is also working to protect Israel. We stand with Israel. How's that working out for Israel? Most people, anybody with half a brain and a passport to another country is getting the hell out of there. The citizens are running. They don't want to fight the war. They don't want to live in a country that's being missiled and bombarded. And the fascist ideology is pretty much identical to the ideology in Ukraine. And they're acting in a way that is not in the best interest of the Israeli people. Israel's economy is collapsed, done, screwed up, and they ain't worried about that because they're like, just like the Ukrainians. What do we care? We'll live off of your money. They'll live off of our money. Look, they've got free college in Israel. They got free healthcare in Israel for everybody. We don't, but we're paying for it. So why wouldn't they? Man, they're jumping for joy there. They're getting all the things that we can't get. And you know what we're told? Oh, that's communism if you get free healthcare. That's communism if you get free college. Really? What about the Israelis? What do they have? Free healthcare and college. Well, is it a communist country? No, it's a very democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, then why the hell can't we have that stuff and we'll be a democracy? No. If we can only pay for Israel to have it, if we would get it, that would make us a communist country. All of our freedom would get a little bit. If you were to get health care, your freedom would automatically disappear. What about Israel? They're free. And they're getting bombed. They're in war. And there's a couple of things going on. Number one, their economy has been trashed. When and if this is over, they're dragged into a quagmire. They're living, it's a welfare state that just lives off the US. And we've got this fake dynamic going on where we pay for they have no economy, they live off of ours. They have no military. We provide everything. They got no bombs. They got no nothing. We provide everything for them. And you think what? You think we're not providing satellite guidance for their missiles and bombs? You think we're not, our special forces are not there working the United? This is a U.S. war. It ain't an Israeli war. Israel is a proxy puppet U.S. outpost. And so now the biggest problems that the neocons have is plausible deniability. That's the big problem. Plausible deniability. And their plausible deniability is not plausible. No, this is not a direct war with Russia. No, we're poor old Ukraine. We're just helping them. Hey, Europe's collapsing. We didn't attack the European pipeline. We didn't attack Nord Stream. It was those darn pesky Ukrainians. Yeah, that was it. No, wasn't us. What about Israel? We're not all the bad things that Israel are doing. We're trying to talk them into stopping. It's not us. Are they using our guns? Fair enough. Our bullets? Yeah, of course. Are we protecting them in the UN? Are we acting as their lawyer worldwide? Yeah, okay, of course. Are we working to censor anybody who goes against them worldwide? Are we literally grabbing American citizens at the airport and taking them aside and questioning them and taking their electronic devices just because they push back against Israeli war mongering? Yeah, but it's a completely separate and individual democracy that we have no control over. We talk to them and we tell them stop doing bad things, but they just won't listen. So we are making implausible arguments that Ukraine and that Gaza, that these are not imperial conflicts, that these are countries that we just happen to be arming, paying all their bills, and providing with political coverage, diplomatic coverage, and providing them with all of the ammunition they need. Oh, by the way, actually, we have soldiers on the ground, and we're working with them for targeting and all these things, but they're certainly individual countries. They're independent, they're sovereign, and we have nothing to do with them. That crap's falling apart. And the rest of the world don't buy it anymore. And the global South, bit by bit, is like hates our guts. I don't blame them. Thank God they may have an opportunity if we all survive to break free from the U.S. boot under their neck. That's a wonderful thing. But Israel is exposing the U.S. in a way that nothing else could. And the world is like, my God, you guys really never gave up on that genocide thing, huh? You're like, yes, we denounce we don't look. The U.S. is like, yes, there was once slave owners and all that kind of crap, but we denounce that stuff. We're all brand new. We're not like we used to do. All that apartheid stuff, lynchings, hangings, slavery, all that stuff. That's all behind us. Genociding people. That's the old me. Not like that anymore. The new me, I got a rainbow flag, a Black Lives Matter mask. Look at this. Every advertisement that comes out of Hollywood has a white guy, a black guy, an Asian woman, a gay couple, a trans person. Come on, we're good guys now. All you got to do is look at our work out of Hollywood and you'll see the diversity because we love everybody, right? So that's what they're doing. Meanwhile, people are saying, but, I saw the advertisement, looks great, and there's, kind of looks like an old Benetton ad. However, you're committing a genocide. There's another contradiction here. Hollywood tells us that they're good guys. Hollywood tells us you're a good guy. They make movies where the US military is going around the world saving everybody. Hey, I saw this movie. Oh, was it Jurassic, the last Jurassic Park? That was loaded with diverse characters. And um, and what we found out in the last Jurassic Park movie, how great was this? The CIA used a diverse young group of CIA agents, young and diverse and good looking, and they infiltrated an evil corporation that was going to do terrible things so they could save us all. Man, Hollywood is really on the ball. They tell us that the CIA is the good guys who are stopping an evil corporation. That's what the CIA is doing. A young, diverse group of CIA agents who are stopping evil corporations. And we're supposed to believe that. When in reality, we see our government working with Nazis and committing a genocide. But Hollywood's given us another, a whole nother angle. Meanwhile, we got Harvey Weinstein, Diddy, and Epstein, and you name it, weird sex, perverted sex clubs, and all kind of deviant activity going on, right? And that's Hollywood. And they're the ones that are telling, think about this. A bunch of degenerates and sexual deviants are telling us that the neocons are the good guys. The CIA is saving us from evil corporations. And oh, by the way, if you go look at the latest version of Red Dawn, that the North Koreans are invading Washington State, right? That's Hollywood for you. But at least we get three strong and diverse women in a superhero movie that saved the world. And they tell us things like, and this movie had all female writers and a diverse group of people who are the producers and the executive. And you're like, have these people ever produced a movie before? No, but that's why we got to give them an opportunity. And we're like, I just watched the movie and it sucks. Oh, so you are racist, sexist, homophobe, are you? You're like, no, I just didn't like the movie. Oh, of course, that's what a racist, sexist, homophobe would say. And then they attack us on Twitter because we hate their stinking movie because they didn't try. Come on. It's not like there wasn't good black or female actors here. I watched, what about Aliens? A female lead. It was great. What about Denzel Washington? Numerous great movies. Right? So don't tell me that you can't have diverse actors and actresses in Hollywood and still make a movie. No, but you're playing games with me. You're trying to play games with my mind and it ain't working. And everybody's like, man, this stuff sucks. And we can kind of see that the CIA and the government that you're telling us are the good guys are destroying our economic sphere, are like attacking our allies, so-called allies in Europe, screwing them up, and are literally supporting a genocide. And it seems to me they have a plan to attack China, to go to war with China, which will, if the proxy war and direct war against Russia doesn't kill us all, then that one surely will. So what do you think? We're stupid? Now, lastly, because we're moving towards the election, we're almost to the election, let's finish with the neocons proxy candidate, right? They got a proxy war, they got a proxy candidate, and it's Kamala Harris. So what do we have? It's Hollywood. We've got it now. We've got a diverse candidate of color. That's what we got. She's Indian, she's Jamaican, and they tell us she's a black woman, and I'm not allowed to say that's disputable, right? I'm not allowed to say that this is what we're not supposed to say, or I'm a racist, sexist, homophobe, white supremacist. I guess maybe I am, I guess, according by their standards, right? I'm not allowed to have this discussion. Let's think about this. Kamala Harris is black according to them. Why? Because she's got a drip of black, as they would say, metaphorically, a drop of black blood, right? And what was the one drop rule? This is the thing about the Dick Cheney Democrats is this, that they're actually reaching back to a racist cultural trope to push the argument that they're diverse, that the argument that they are used, that they are for diversity, uses the worst racist trope that you could ever have. The one drop rule. During slavery, what they said is if you've got one drop of blood, well, that's metaphorical. It just means if you have any, here's what the one drop rule is. If you got one drop of black blood, then you're a black person, right? In other words, if you've got one drop of slave blood, then you're a slave. But they don't mean a drop of blood. That's metaphorical. What they mean is if you have any ancestry of the slave class, that makes you a slave. Any ancestry. If your grandfather, if your great grandfather was a slave back then, or even a free black person, whatever, of the slave class, then that means you are of the slave class. Any ancestry, not if you have any ancestry of that was white, of the well, I can't say ruling class because there was a ruling elite that was very rich, and then most of the white people were abused by the same ruling class on a different degree, right? Either they were impoverished in the South because the slave owners had free labor, which made it kind of difficult to make a living for the working class white guy if they got all free labor, right? Now, additionally, I mean, all the way around. Did you know that during slavery, they literally, because let's face it, there's a lot of smart slaves. They trained slaves to be bookkeepers. They trained them to be lawyers. Everything you can imagine to run the whole intellectually, to run the plantation, you name it. And a lot of slave owners lived in like Philly, right? So what happens if you're a white guy in the South? If you're a lawyer, you're competing with slave lawyers. If you're a CPA, right, accountant, a bookkeeper, you're competing. Hey, you go to the plantation. Can I get a job as a bookkeeper? No. Why not? Because we got free bookkeepers. They're slaves. They screwed the white people in the South, the working class in the South, with free labor. Then what do they do in the North? Hey, we got factories. And in this factory, we got child labor. We got, so they on and on and on. 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. They screwed the white people in the South too. The working class in the South got screwed by the ruling elite. They screwed everybody. They screwed everybody. And they used the one drop rule to make sure they had plenty of slaves. Now they use the one drop rule for Canada, for Kamala. She's black. Why? Because her father was Jamaican. Well, let me ask you this. Couldn't you reverse the one drop rule and say if you have one drop of white blood, in other words, if any of your ancestors are white, that makes you a white person, right? I mean, logically speaking, one drop of blood making you a black person versus one drop of white blood, one drop of black blood making you a black person versus one drop of white blood making you a white person is exactly the same. There is no difference in that. You determine one as opposed to the other. And it benefited the ruling elite to go with the direction of, if you got any black ancestors, you're a black person. So they use that racist trope to their economic benefit to have more slaves. And now the Dick Cheney Democrats tell us that Kamala's black because of the one drop rule. Very specifically, they are using the arguments of slavery and the arguments of the slave owners to promote Kamala Harris as the black person. I'm not going to say offended by that because I don't get offended, but I will say I can see what the hell you're doing. You ain't fooling me. And here's what makes it so obvious. If Trump or anybody says, well, I'm not sure she's black, they go ape shit and they attack that. You're a racist scumbag. You're the lowest kind of racist because you said she ain't black. But from the perspective of logic, you calling her black is no different than me calling her, I didn't even know if she's got much white in her. I'll call her an Indian from India. So what if you're like, she's black? And I say, no, she's not. She's Indian. No, but her father was black, but her mother was Indian. Let's face it, there were a lot of people, Zionists, who argue that if your mother was Jewish, that makes you Jewish. If your mother was Jewish, that makes you Jewish. I'm not saying I'm down with that argument or that all Jewish people make that argument. I'm saying there's a faction of Zionism that says if your mother's Jewish, that means you're Jewish. Well, that means that by their argument, I'm not saying I agree with it, if your mother's Indian, you're Indian. So that would mean that Kamala would be Indian, but it doesn't benefit the Dick Cheney Democrats to say she's Indian. So they go to the racist trope of the one drop rule. She's got a drop of black blood. She ain't Indian. She can't even be Indian. She's got to be black. And that wasn't used for the benefit of black people. It wasn't used to build up black people or to say black people were equal with everyone. It was used to say slavery and black people are animals at the time, are literal chattel, are animals like cows and pigs. And if you've got one drop of cow and pig blood in you, then you're a cow or a pig. You ain't a human. That's literally what that was. The Dick Cheney Democrats right now are using a slave era trope to argue that their candidate is black. And if you try to discuss that, there's people have something that got a problem with that. Well, I think we should be able to discuss anything. Now, let me add this. Somebody says Vice President Harris is a communist. If you think that she is a communist, then you don't understand what communism is. And there are a lot of people like that. There are a lot of people, I'll put it like this. There are a lot of people, I know people who, plenty of people, who basically, communism is somebody I don't like. Fascism is somebody I don't like. Trump is a fascist. I don't think Trump is a fascist. I think he is, would I call him a right-wing strong man? Yeah, I would. Would I call him a fascist? I would call Trump a fascist. I'd call him a right-wing strong man, but not a fascist. And to understand communism, so she's a revolutionary figure who communism, socialism. So she thinks that the government should be returned on the people to the people, that the government shouldn't be, we shouldn't have an economic system where the corporations, everything is for the corporations, that everything, that the government is aligned with the corporations. If you understand, she's just a neoliberal. Trump's a neoliberal. She's a neoliberal. They're both neoliberals. They both believe in neoliberal economics. And they're both going to act on behalf of the ruling class. I think the difference is right now, to be frank, Trump will throw some crumbs. You know, hey, no tips, no, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, some things like that. I think here's what I'll say is the difference. They're both neoliberals. Trump, I think, to be quite frank, and whether he'll act on it or not, but let's just talk about Trump's proposed policies, right? Not saying that any of us going to act on it, but if you're calling Trump her a communist or Trump whatever, a fascist, whatever, the difference between the two of them is this. Trump's proposed policies right now would throw a crumb to the working class, right? A few crumbs. It would be no taxes on, it's going to be, we shouldn't do as much, we shouldn't do as much censoring. Now, don't get me wrong. The Trump people, when it comes to Israel, would do censoring, but they wouldn't for Israel, but they wouldn't censor on some other things. So the Democrats would want to censor everything. And I think the Republicans have very specific Zionism they want to censor for, but not some other things. So there's a difference there. I'm not saying one's better than the other. Well, probably if one person wants to censor everything and the other wants to censor 20% of the things, you could argue that that is better. But still a similar thing, different degrees of censorship. That's what we'll say. Different degrees of censorship. Different degrees of oppression for the First Amendment. I would argue that Trump wants to throw some crumbs. And in throwing some crumbs to the working class, yes, we won't tax tips, we won't tax Social Security. I think it is that Trump has a little bit more of a connection to the working class, in that he understands you got to give them something, or they're going to cut your freaking head off. I think that's what Trump's like. Look, let's give him some crumbs. Okay, let's not just like not give him anything. Is he going to be a imperialist and a neoliberal and all that crap? Yes, but he understands you got to throw some crumbs to the working class. That's what I think is the big difference. The Dick Cheney Democrats, nothing, no crumbs for the working class at all. They despise the working class. I don't think Trump despises the working class on the level that the Dick Cheney Democrats do. Now, You know what happens with the dictating Cheney Democrats? This is what they'll do. You love Trump. Because their minds are so burned out at this point that they only see this binary thing, that if I evaluate the Democrats and Trump and I say in this area I think Trump's better, that means I'm pro-Trump, as opposed to I'm not pro either one of them. But that's, again, the cultish mind of the current of both parties right now are so cultish. And I'm just going to talk about the Democrats. The cultish mind of the Democrats is, if you ever evaluate the Democrats and the Republicans, or Trump, they don't believe it's just Trump. There's no such thing as Republicans, or Kamala and Trump, the policies, and you say, in this area, I think Trump's probably better. Even if you evaluate it and you say, but let me give you some other factors here, then you're pro-Trump, because it has become, for the cult of the Dick Cheney Democrats, it has become nothing but good versus evil. My candidate is good, yours is evil. If you say, well, I'm not voting for your candidate, then you're voting for evil. But I'm not voting at all. Well, then you're voting for evil. But I mean, I'm voting for Jill Stein. But that's a vote for Trump. Why? Because there's only good and evil in their poor little binary minds. And if you're not supporting Kamala, who's good, anything else you do is evil. Their mind is binary. Kamala's good. Anything else is evil. So anything else is a vote for evil, a vote for Trump. Well, I'm voting for the Communist Party of America, Libertarian Party, Party for Socialism and Liberation, the whatever the hell party that it is, the Black Panther Party. I don't care. I vote for any party, not vote for the Democrats. All that's a vote for Trump. Why? Because Trump's evil. And if you're not voting for Kamala, it's good. Anything else, even not voting, is a vote for evil. Their minds are totally washed out and binary. That's where they are now. That's what they've been taught. That's the rules they got to follow. Don't hate on them. But they got a candidate who is nothing but an empty pantsuit, who we've listened to her, and my God, man, to listen to her, she's the opposite of what I like to argue with for tests, right? When people ask me about tests, I love tests. I was been a good test taker, love tests, right? And to me, even when you don't know the answers for tests, sometimes you can figure out the answer based on the question. You could read the question, it'll point you in the direction of the answer. Or sometimes people miss test questions because they don't read the question, right? Read the question, answer the question. Oftentimes use the words in the question, right? What is the capital of Nebraska? You could answer, what is the capital of Maryland? You could write an answer like this: the capital of Maryland is Annapolis, right? What is the capital of fill in the blank? Pennsylvania. Your answer: the capital of Pennsylvania is Harrisburg. That's easy, isn't it right? That's how you answer a question and take a test. Make it easy for yourself. Read the question. The capital of, let me make sure, Pennsylvania. Yes, is, and then you got to write the answer. So I clearly understand what they want. They want me to answer to them, right? Okay. You've read the question, you comprehend the question, you answer the question. Kamala Harris: what is the capital of Pennsylvania? Well, I was born in a middle-class family, and we really were proud of our lawns. And she doesn't read the question. She doesn't. So you see, you have a person that doesn't listen well. She's not where you are. You're asking her a question and she doesn't listen to the question. She doesn't think I have to answer the question. She's got answers and she gives you the answers. They ain't to that question, but those are the only answers she got. If you were to say to her, you didn't answer the question, Kamala, she'd say, but that's all I got. I told you that Trump was bad. I told you that I grew up I gave you my history about my family and we were proud of our lawns. And then I said, Americans have dreams and ambitions, and to be America is to have dreams and ambitions. That's her answer to every question. Hey, Kamala, what do you think about war? Americans have dreams and ambitions. And I was born in a middle-class family. We worked hard. Did I tell you? Trump stopped us from passing bills that would have been good, and we loved our lawns. My mother used to take me to civil rights marches and things of that. Oh, okay. So, Kamala, what do you think about the moon landing? Let me tell you something about when I grew up. We were born in a middle-class family. She's got one answer, and she uses it over and over again. And at some point, you realize she ain't listening to the question. She can't understand or comprehend what the hell's going on around her, and she is not smart enough to bullshit me. Politicians got to be smart. When you ask me a question that I can't answer, I got to be able to bullcrap you. And it's got to be related. I got to give you an answer that sounds like I'm answering the question when I'm not really answering the question. That's what I got to be able to do if I'm a politician, a good politician. Anyone, you got to be able to sound like you're answering the question. She can't do it. She's got one answer. She was born in a middle-class family. She was in a neighborhood that was proud of their lawns. And Trump is bad, and he stopped all the bills that we needed passing from passing. And I'm proud of Joe Biden. The economy's great, and we're going to make things better. And Putin's evil, and we're going to have the most lethal military in the world. And oh my God, things are going to be great. When I get elected, you're going to be able to eat cake and ice cream 3 times a day and not gain a pound. We'll never get darkness again. The sun will shine all the time. There'll be no rain. You won't even need rain. The animals, the lions, will lay down with the lamb. That's the best she can do. Total, obvious bull crap. And that's what they're running. Now, Trump ain't setting the world on fire. If he were smart, he could wipe the floor with her. But if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bicycle. But I think Trump has some smart people around him, and they are keeping him going. And Trump, here's what we got. Kamala's running on I ain't Trump, and I am a Dick Cheney Democrat. Trump's running on these. I think Trump's running on this. When I was president, the economy was good and things were better and you were happier. I think if I had to sum up what Trump is running on, I would sum it up like this. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Because I was the guy that was here 4 years ago. When I was here, are you happier with what you're getting now? Or are you happier with what you had under me? I ain't saying what he had was a picnic, but I'm saying if people got to make that choice, I don't think it's going to work out well for the Dick Cheney Democrats. Now, I don't trust them because let's face it, somebody's trying to do a bad turn to old Trumpy. You know what I mean? Let's face it, there's nefarious forces out there. You know what kills me? They're like, yeah, you got to love this. The intelligence, apparently they talked to Trump. Hey, Iran's trying to kill you. And Trump's like, yeah, Iran's trying to kill me. They're like, yeah, Iran is trying to kill you. Now, Trump's like, he goes on the stomp on the campaign trail. Iran's trying to kill me. I don't think Trump believes that. I think Trump understands that the people that are trying to kill him, that if he just says it ain't Iran, it's the CIA that's trying to kill me, that they'll be like, oh, we really got to kill him now, for God's sake, this man cannot live. So I think Trump understands that. I believe that. I think Trump understands who's trying to kill him. Let's face it, he's got people around him. If we can figure it out, you think they can't figure it out. But I think Trump also understands that if he pushes this thing too hard, they'll get closer and closer, that they'll just be like, you know what? We've been using patsies on a roof. We use patsies on a golf course. Trump's got to go. No more patsies. That they'll just like literally walk up to him, in the middle of a press conference. Some guy will walk up with a jacket on that says property of the CIA and just shoot Trump right in front of us. I think he knows that like they'll get desperate to the point where they're like, well, let's dispense with like this pretense that, we're using proxies to kill Trump. Let's just go ahead and do it in front of everybody and just like do the old, yeah, we killed Trump. We did what we had to do. Let's move on. There's no point pretending anymore that this is, that we're going to let somebody win that we don't want to win. Trump had to go. We did what we had to do. I think Trump realizes that his life he is in mortal danger, shall we say. And I think some of the rhetoric that we're hearing from Donald Trump is a recognition that perhaps he better look over his shoulder and have a food taster. All right. Well, it's 10:35 in the morning. So it's time for me to book. But what I'm going to start off by doing is I'm actually, believe it or not, I've been busy a lot. And we've got some, what are these things called? Super chats. Rolf Steiner says, God, on the second coming of the Messiah, Trump said that Iran tried to assassinate him and he'll nuke the Persians to smithereens. This is shocking. Not Trump. As I said, I think Trump knows. I think he's realizes he's got to say that for the Zionists. Maybe I'm wrong. Come on. I don't think Trump and the people around him are stupid. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious what's going on. And I think he has to say, Trump knows I think Trump is politically savvy enough to know what he has to say to survive. That's my opinion. Could be wrong. It's just an opinion. How about we go with Rolf? Again, Rolf says, Garland, the Jews are hating all their neighbors like crazy, and the Americans stand with Israel to death. The USA ready for nuclear Armageddon. Rolf, the difference I think you make is you say Jews, I say Zionists. I mean, why are so many Jewish people in the streets around the world saying not in my name? Literally, they got groups called Not in My Name. The Zionists, they're not acting like they're crazy. The Zionism is in itself a form of insanity. And the U.S. has, in the same way that Nazism is a form of insanity, and the U.S. has fueled that. Is the USA ready for nuclear Armageddon? No, who could be? But we're certainly pushing things in that. The Dick Cheney Democrats are pushing things in that direction. Again, Rolf, man, if the USA slowly became the Fourth Reich, well, I don't know how slowly, would it have the iconography of its own, like a burning Jesus cross Bible and manifest destiny symbols? Nope. Nope. What the U.S. does is it has a Black Lives Matter mask and a rainbow flag. See, the U.S. it's a different kind. Liberal fascism disguises itself as the good guys. The traditional fascism we see in Ukraine, where they're like, yes, we're ethno-fascists and we're proud of it. Look at this, the iconography of the Third Reich. Whereas a liberal fascism says we're the good guys, and they hold up symbols of good, what they believe is kindness and goodness. Look at us. We love the Black people, and we love the LGBTQ plus people and all that stuff, right? That's liberal fascism. They say, and we're here to save America. We're promoting democracy. Hitler didn't say he's promoting democracy. He said, we're taking everything, it's ours. And we'll kill anybody who gets in our way. Where the liberal fascists say, no, we're not like that. We're here to spread goodness and cheer and wonderfulness. This is just a different variety. How about Andrew says, David Hughes has a new book that is spot on. Hawes. I wish he'd share the name of the book for everybody. All right, let's keep going. Give us the name of the book. How about Rolf then says, G.I. Zelensky just picked up a lazy $8 billion to keep the war going until the U.S. presidential selection. How is America rich to fund all of these wars? Well, it's all borrowed money. They're burning up the credit card, buddy. They're burning up the credit card. And the $8 billion is not to keep the war going. It's to keep the oligarchs, the money coming in Ukraine, so the oligarchs can divvy it up. Raphael says, analogy is good, G. The only thing we have to say, Tyson would want to fight. Putin is a chicken who hates war. He will be afraid to punch you. Fear, afraid. I've heard it said like this: the Americans don't know what war is, so they're always looking for war, want to fight war. The Russians know what war is, and they understand what war, and they don't want to fight it. Putin is to me is wise. He's attempting to prevent the kind of clash that will end in a cataclysmic nuclear annihilation of all human beings. So if you call that weak or chicken, call me weak and chicken too. Oh, here we go. Rolf, man, he's on a mission today. How weird would it be if Zionists and Jews controlled Israel, Ukraine, and USA, and they all thought that they were either chosen or manifest destiny people? Interesting. Stephen Hayes says, new suits bought by some guy. I don't bother asking why. Why? My wife getting bling. Forever aspect, it don't mean a thing. Every girl crazy about a sharp dressed man. Name that tune. ZZ Top. Rolf says, Alan Dershowitz, he only got massages at the ranch. Yeah. Well, you know what's funny? It's like the Diddy thing or the Harvey Weinstein thing. They all, okay. Diddy's bad guy and all that kind of stuff, a sexual deviant, whatever you want to call it, right? Where's the Epstein list? I don't want to hear about Diddy. Where's the Epstein list? Why are they not going to show us the Epstein list? They ain't showing us the Epstein list. And by the way, what happened to Epstein again? He committed suicide. All right. Raphael says, I believe hires up in Russia came to Putin and said to him, fighter, we will bring someone who wants to fight. I don't. He's a very, very popular man. I think the Russians understand. See, here's the thing about it. You're looking at countries that have a different concept of time. Think Iran, Russia, China. Russia's the young puppy on the block. They only been around 1,000 years. China, what, 3,000-4,000 years as a country? So they have a different concept of time. People are like, we got to act now. We've got to move. Russia's got to act now. Russia's got to move. They don't have to move. It's like a good chess player. A good chess player will stare at the board for a long time before they make a move. They ain't in no rush. And the Russians move slowly and deliberately, along with Iran and China, slowly and deliberately. Would let them eat coconuts would be a winning slogan. Thank you. Excuse me for yawning. Rolf, here's on a mission. The significance of the passage of time. There you go. That's Kamala. Just babble. Just pure babble. Let us continue to go. I think that's it. I'm going to take a look at Rockfin. Did anybody on Rockfin say anything? Yes, they did. Let's go. TD, thank you very much, TD. Certainly appreciate it. Let's look at somebody on Rockfin said pretty hard to find as good a puppet as Biden, but Cammy is probably as close as they'll get. Trump's pretty close too now that they have him whipped back in the line. No matter who gets elected, the swamp will eat them up. U.S. policy always dominates over politics, and only a collapse will change that. Let's look at here. We got Radical Education says Diddy is the Epstein of hip hop ties to DNC. Well, here's the thing, not really, because he may have ties to the Democrats. Epstein was clearly a Mossad CIA operation. It was just so clearly an operation that continues to this day, I might add, and that if you need to read some and watch some Whitney Webb, and she'll let you know their operations like this have been going on for years, and they continue to go on. So Diddy's a different animal, in my opinion. Miss You With It says, have you looked into the Pact of the Future and the catastrophic LOS legislation? I'm curious what your take on all that is. No, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Send me something. Okay, how about we go to not familiar? I haven't heard of that. How about we go? Andrew says, Wall Street, the Nazis, and the crimes of the deep state. There you're talking, brother. All right, let's try to go to Rumble and see if we got Rumble rants. Because maybe there's somebody there. Don't see any Rumble rants. But we got a lot of people watching. Wow, 123. Things are really picking up on Rumble. Awesome. In case they throw me off YouTube. Bit of that going around these days. You know, they've Mark Sloboda, various people are getting thrown off YouTube. Could happen to me, could happen to anybody. Right now I'm still here on, but here's what that means. I only got just about 4,000 followers on Rumble on any given day. I could be done. Please go follow me on Rumble. Go follow me on Rockfin. If you wake up one day and you click on my channel and it says this stuff does not exist, you know where to find me. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I think that's about it. Share this on all your social media platforms if you can. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Telegram. Patreon, if you can afford to donate on Patreon, buy me a coffee. You know, buy me a coffee. You can do the Patreon thing too now. You can do monthly on that, or just like $5, whatever you can afford. PayPal, Cash App, whatever the case may be. Everything scrolling across the bottom, it would be appreciated. Even if you can't, just make sure you hit the like button, please. Smash the like button. Hit the like button, beat the like button, violently, brutally, and viciously attack the like button, please. And share this on all your social media platforms. Thank you very much. I'm out. Oh, by the way, one other thing, I've got a Substack, and anybody who wants to go join my Substack here, I think next month I'm going to start writing really some things are going to change out for me next month. I'll let you know, but I'm really going to get into Substack a lot next month. And please, that's a great way also if you want to donate. I think it's like $4.99 a month. So if you could join my Substack and for $4.99 a month, that would be highly appreciated. Peace. I'm out.